For weeks, rumors swirled. Stories clashed. Fingers pointed in every direction, but tonight, the silence is broken. Eric finally admits the truth. In a desperate bid to protect the people he swore he'd never abandon, he made the call that changed everything. A single decision, dialing the number for Adult Protective Services, has set off a storm of questions, outrage, and heartbreak across the community, because what Eric reveals next isn't just a confession. It's a bombshell, one that exposes betrayal, broken trust, and the dark reality hidden inside a family already on the edge. Eric had been quiet for days. Behind the scenes, he was exhausted, shaken, and emotionally raw. The weight of what he'd seen and what he'd tried to stop had pushed him to the breaking point. Friends described him as restless. Pacing through the night, he'd stopped responding to messages, stepped away from social media, and avoided even the people closest to him. But when he finally spoke, his voice trembled, not from fear, but from relief. "I didn't want to do it," he said, "but I had no choice. Someone had to protect them." The family at the center of Eric's confession, Ray, Lorraine, and Timmy, had long been a symbol of resilience in their small community. People followed their story online, rooting for their recovery, their rebuilding, their chance to start over. But behind the Facebook posts and smiling photos, Eric says a different story was unfolding, one filled with neglect, abuse, and manipulation. He paints a grim picture. Ray, frail and weak, sitting for hours in his own urine. Lorraine, complaining about pain and headaches no one seemed to take seriously. And Timmy, caught in the middle of it all, torn between loyalty and fear. Eric's breaking point came after what he describes as 3 days of begging for help. He says he and Timmy went to the courthouse to file for a protective order, not once, but 3 times. "We went 3 days in a row to get that protective order," Eric recalls. 2 days we got denied. The 3rd day we were desperate. They wouldn't help us. The only option we had left was Adult Protective Services. According to Eric, the call wasn't made out of revenge or anger. It was out of necessity. He says he'd seen enough, and what he couldn't ignore any longer was the risk. "Betty told us she'd seen BJ hit Larry," Eric explains. "Timmy said he'd been beaten. Everyone was scared to talk. That's when I knew if I didn't do something, nobody would." The more Eric talks, the more the cracks in the story begin to show. He describes a chain of failed interventions, court delays, DNIED protective orders, and missed opportunities. 2 days of rejection, followed by silence, even when Adult Protective Services got involved. He says the system seemed slow to react. "They came down there," Eric says, "and told Betty he's just trying to build you a home." But behind that simple statement, Eric claims there was manipulation and denial. He insists that while he was working to build a safe home for the family, others were sabotaging it from within, a pattern of neglect, he says. "That had gone on too long. We had the Amish ready to build. We had permits approved. We were days away from making it happen. But then I saw who was back on the property, and I knew it wasn't over." At this point, Eric's frustration turns to heartbreak. He pauses often when he talks about Lorraine, her frailty, her confusion, her loyalty to people he believes were hurting her. "She loved her son," Eric says quietly. "She loved Timmy more than anything. She just wanted to see him, to hold him. She didn't understand what was really happening." But when he brought Timmy back home, something felt off. He describes seeing those hands, the physical signs that something was very wrong. It was then. He says that he knew his instincts had been right all along. "I wanted to react right then," Eric admits, "but I stayed calm. I told myself, get the facts first. Talk to Lorraine. Find out what's really going on." He did, and what he found only deepened the mystery. When he asked who was staying in the camper on the property, he says Larry denied everything. "Nobody's in the camper," Larry told him, "but I knew he was lying," Eric says. "I could see it in his eyes." Eric's tone hardens as he recalls watching online commentators try to piece together what was happening. He mentions one by name, YJ the author, and says that while most of the internet was guessing, only a few were close to the truth. He was about 95% right. Eric admits. But nobody online really knew what was happening behind the scenes. That's why I'm talking now. Because everything that happens in the dark comes to the light. In Eric's mind, that light is long overdue. He describes a household in chaos, money problems, stolen copper wiring, and broken promises. He accuses people close to the family of covering up serious abuse, and at the center of it all, he says, is one decision that could have changed everything but didn't. They told her she could have a continuance. Eric says, referring to Betty. She denied it. She said the abuser could stay in the house. He pauses again. What did you think was going to happen? He asks, you admit someone beat your father, beat your son, stole from you, and you still let them stay. That's not love. That's control. Eric's words are filled with exhaustion, the kind that comes from watching tragedy repeat itself. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. The gravity of what he's saying carries more weight than anger ever could. I knew this was going to happen, he says quietly. And they have nobody to blame but themselves. Still, Eric's confession isn't just about the family. It's also about betrayal. He turns his attention to someone else. Patrick, a man he once called a friend. I tried to help him. Eric says, I got him a condo, a place to stay, told him to get better. But when I went back, it was destroyed. Eric describes the scene in vivid detail. Dog waste. Tobacco spit, pills scattered across the floor. The property was in his name. And now he says it's his reputation that's on the line. You think you know what I've been through up here? He asks, you have no idea. I'm a good friend. I just wanted him to get better. Then his voice softens again, not with anger, but disappointment. I really thought people could change. He pulls out paperwork, a criminal record, thick as a book. It's like a Bible, he says. I didn't even want to believe it at first. Among the charges, Eric says, are stalking and sexual crimes, recent ones. It's another blow to his faith in people, and another piece in the puzzle of betrayal that surrounds the family. I hate this, Eric admits. I really do. Because his mom and sister, they've already been through so much. They didn't deserve any of this. As part one closes, Eric's confession feels less like an expose and more like a cry for help, not for himself, but for the people caught in a web of neglect, fear, and deception. I don't care about the social media, he says. I haven't been doing this for likes or clicks. I've been doing this because someone had to, and now the truth is out. He looks straight into the camera. The expression on his face isn't anger, it's resolve, a man tired of fighting, but unwilling to stay silent any longer. If anybody ever sent money to that family, he says, put it in the comments. We need to know where that money came from. Then, a long pause, a silence that says more than words ever could. Eric leans forward. Because now, he whispers, everything changes. The silence after Eric's confession didn't last long, within hours of his words spreading online. The comments began to pour in, thousands of them, some praising his courage, others calling him a liar. The community that once stood united around a shared cause, helping a struggling family, had suddenly split in two. Those who believed Eric's story called him a whistleblower, a man brave enough to speak when no one else would. Those who didn't accused him of betrayal, of turning on the very people he promised to protect. And somewhere in between the noise, the truth waited, tangled in screenshots, live streams, and whispered conversations that no one seemed to fully understand. Eric didn't back down. He had been called everything under the sun, manipulative, attention-seeking, even evil, but his message never wavered. He said he wasn't trying to destroy anyone. He was trying to save them. People can say what they want, Eric said in a later live stream. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know what I did was right. Behind the calm voice, though, was a man at war with himself. He had spent months trying to help, organizing donations, coordinating with the Amish builders, visiting the family, pushing for change, and yet, all of it had unraveled before his eyes. He says the system failed them, that bureaucracy and denial killed the chance for real safety, but in the end, it wasn't the courts, the agencies, or even the abuse itself that broke him. It was the betrayal. To understand Eric's breaking point. You have to go back to the days before his call to Protective Services. He describes standing in front of the courthouse, holding paperwork that could have changed everything, a protective order that, if approved, might have kept the abusers away for good. 2 days we got denied, Eric recalls. 2 whole days. We stood there, told them what was happening, and they still sent us away. The 3rd time, he says, they were out of options, and that's when he picked up the phone. It wasn't an easy call. Eric admits his hands shook as he dialed the number. He didn't even know what to say at first. I told them, "Look, there's an elderly man being abused, a woman being manipulated, a son who's scared. Somebody needs to go out there." The operator on the other end listened, took notes, and promised to send someone. That promise, Eric says, gave him hope, but the reality that followed shattered it. Adult Protective Services eventually did visit the home. Eric claims they spoke to Betty, the matriarch of the family, and told her something he still can't believe. They told her, "He's trying to build you a home. That's it." That's all they said. He shakes his head. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't look behind the walls. They didn't listen to Lorraine. They didn't care that BJ was back there again. They just wanted to close the case and move on. That moment changed Eric. He says he realized that if the system wasn't going to protect them, he would have to do it himself. He poured everything he had into rebuilding the property, the permits, the coordination with the Amish, the fundraising, the long nights planning logistics. But as he worked, he began to notice something strange. The people he thought were on his side started pulling away. The ones he trusted most started acting differently. I was the only one doing anything, Eric said. Until my friends got here, it was just me. And even then, it felt like I was being shut out. By Thursday of that week, Eric says he thought they were finally turning a corner. The permits were approved. The Amish were ready to build. He had even found a safe spot for the family's new home, high enough to avoid flooding, far enough from the chaos of the main property. It was perfect, Eric said. They could have had peace. They could have started over. But instead of gratitude, he says, he was met with resistance. I told Betty, "They're not going to let you put the home there. The land you're on now isn't even yours, and it's a flood zone," she said. I liked that idea, but then someone got in her ear. According to Eric, conflicting voices began influencing Betty's decisions, people who wanted control, not safety. Soon after, everything began to spiral. One minute she wanted the house back there. The next she didn't. One person told me she was scared. Another said she changed her mind. It didn't make sense anymore. Then came the discovery that made Eric's stomach drop. The campfires. He found them behind the property, near an area locals called Devil's Backbone. 2 campfires, he said. And I knew right then something wasn't right. From that moment, paranoia took over. Eric couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that someone, or several someones, were working behind the scenes to undo everything he was building. Still, he pressed forward. I kept telling myself, just get them in that home. Just get it done. Once they're safe, everything else will fall into place. But everything didn't fall into place. It fell apart. When he took Timmy back to the house to see his mother, Eric said he felt the tension the second he arrived. You could feel it in the air, he said. That silence, that kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. He tried to stay calm, tried to be respectful, but what he saw made his blood boil. The second I got out of that vehicle, I saw those hands. And I wanted to react. I really did. But I had to stay in control. I had to know what was really happening. He spoke to Lorraine. He asked questions. He looked around the property, noticing signs that things were worse than he'd imagined. When I asked who was in the camper, Larry told me nobody, but I knew he was lying. I just knew it. As Eric's investigation deepened, so did the backlash online. Clips of his live streams were taken out of context. Anonymous pages popped up to discredit him, and yet he kept talking, because for Eric, this wasn't about saving face. It was about saving people. You can believe whatever you want, he said in one stream. But when you've seen what I've seen, when you've watched someone you care about be destroyed by the people around them, you don't stay quiet. You can't. But even as he tried to shine light on the truth, Eric's personal life was crumbling. He says he spent thousands of dollars of his own money trying to help. He slept in his car, went days without eating properly, and lived under constant stress, all while being accused of doing it for the views. If this was about clicks, he said, I'd have quit a long time ago. I didn't come here to build a channel. I came here to build a home. That's when the focus shifted from the family to the fallout between Eric and Patrick. Patrick had been one of Eric's closest allies. Together, they had appeared in videos, organized fundraisers, and coordinated outreach. But Eric says something changed after the call to Adult Protective Services. He started acting different, Eric explained. He'd disappear for hours. He'd show up angry. He'd twist things, I said. At one point, Patrick asked Eric for help finding a place to stay, wanting to help. Eric rented him a condo next to his own Airbnb. It was meant to be a fresh start, a chance for Patrick to heal, but what Eric says happened next left him speechless. When I went back to check on the place, it was trashed, he said. Dog poop on the floor, tobacco spit all over the walls, pills scattered everywhere. It was disgusting. He shakes his head, remembering, the lease was in my name. I was the one responsible. I couldn't believe it. The betrayal cut deep, but what came next hurt even more. I found out about his record, Eric said. I didn't want to believe it, but it was true: stalking, sexual charges, everything. He pauses. His mom and sister have already buried 2 sons. I didn't want them to go through this again. But he needs to tell the truth. As the comments continued to flood in, Eric's followers demanded answers. Who was lying? Who was protecting whom? And most of all, where were Ray, Lorraine, and Timmy now? Eric didn't have all the answers yet, but he promised one thing: they would come. Everything that happens in the dark, he repeated, will come to the light. He said he was done being silent. He was done being polite. And he was done letting fear control the story. I'm ready to spill the beans, Eric said. All of it. As his live stream ended, thousands watched in silence, waiting for what he'd say next. They didn't know it yet. But the next 24 hours would change everything again, because the call to Adult Protective Services wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. By the next morning, Eric's confession was everywhere. Clipped, reposted, debated. Shared across dozens of Facebook groups, YouTube channels, and forums. The internet had officially taken over the story, and as with every story that catches fire online, the truth became harder to find. Everyone had an opinion, everyone had a theory, but only one person had lived it. And that person was now under a microscope. Eric woke up to thousands of notifications. Some were messages of support, people thanking him for speaking up, saying they'd seen the same warning signs all along. Others were hateful, calling him a liar, a manipulator, or worse, but Eric didn't delete a single one. He wanted people to see the full picture. I'm not running from this, he said in a live stream later that day. I said what I said. I did what I did, and I'll own it. He leaned into the camera, eyes red from exhaustion. You can think I'm the bad guy. That's fine. But if you knew what I knew, you would have called, too. Behind the screens, investigators were starting to pay attention. Local law enforcement, already familiar with the family's situation, began revisiting old reports. Adult Protective Services confirmed they had received multiple complaints regarding the same address, and quietly, off-camera, Eric says he was contacted by people claiming to have information, screenshots, messages, even photos that could support his story. I didn't go looking for this, Eric said. People came to me. They wanted the truth out there, too. But with every new piece of evidence came more chaos. The line between truth and speculation blurred even further. Some creators began dissecting his live streams frame by frame. Others made hour-long videos accusing him of exaggeration, and while Eric tried to stay focused on the facts, the noise around him grew louder. They're not talking about the abuse anymore, he said. They're talking about me, about rumors, about things that don't matter. And meanwhile, people are still in danger. That danger, Eric insisted, wasn't hypothetical. He said he'd seen it firsthand: bruises, fear, neglect. He'd watched Lorraine struggle to speak. He'd seen Ray, frail and disoriented, sitting alone for hours, and he'd watched the cycle of manipulation pull them all back into the same environment that had broken them in the first place. You can't unsee that, Eric said. You can't just walk away. To him, the call to Adult Protective Services wasn't betrayal. It was mercy, but to others, it was treason. The backlash from the family supporters was swift. Some accused Eric of exaggerating for attention. Others claimed he was trying to control the narrative or profit from pain. But what stung him the most were the people he had once called friends, people he'd helped turning against him publicly. One of those people was Patrick. That's the one that hurt, Eric admitted. I helped that man. I believed in him. And then he turned around and made me the villain. The two had worked side by side for weeks, together. They'd filmed interviews, coordinated supply drops, and shared updates about the family's living conditions. But after the call to Adult Protective Services, Patrick began distancing himself. Then he started posting his own version of events. He made me look like a snake, Eric said, shaking his head. And the sad part is, he knew the truth. He just didn't want to admit it. As the drama unfolded online, Eric stayed focused on the facts. He began releasing parts of his own documentation, call logs, screenshots, notes. He said he wanted transparency. If I'm lying, he said, prove it. Everything I've done is on record. The protective order, the reports, the meetings. Go look for yourself. And people did. Dozens of online sleuths started digging into court databases, police records, and social media archives. Within hours, pieces of Eric's story began checking out. There were protective orders, there were multiple calls to state agencies, and there had been previous allegations of abuse. Still, the internet wasn't satisfied. Because for every verified fact, there was another rumor waiting to take its place. At the center of the digital storm was one question. No one could agree on: why now? If Eric had known all this for so long, why was he speaking out only after things exploded? He answered that question directly in one emotional post. Because I was trying to handle it quietly, he wrote. I didn't want to humiliate anybody. I didn't want to destroy the family. I wanted to help. But they left me no choice. He continued, his words raw and unfiltered. They said I was doing it for clout, for clicks, for money. I don't need any of that. I've been trying to get a family out of hell. And when I couldn't do it with kindness, I had to do it with truth. By now, the story had drawn in people far outside the community. Other creators began covering it. True crime YouTubers, commentary channels, even local journalists. The family's names were trending. Their property was being shown in reaction. Videos. Clips of Eric crying, pacing, or yelling "I told you so" were plastered across every platform. And while Eric was still determined to stand by what he'd done, the human cost of his decision was starting to show. He looked tired, older. The spark that once lit his eyes had faded into exhaustion. I've been up for days, he admitted. I haven't slept. I keep thinking about Lorraine, about Ray, about how it could have been different if people just listened. The investigation, meanwhile, was moving slowly but steadily. Adult Protective Services had revisited the property. Local police began conducting interviews, and according to Eric, several people who had once defended the alleged abuser were now cooperating. The truth is starting to come out, he said. People are finally talking. He believed his call had set that in motion, that his decision to involve APS had forced the system to act, but that didn't mean he felt victorious. If anything, he looked defeated. I wish it never had to come to this, he said. I wish they'd just accepted help. We were days away from having that house built, days. Then came the most chilling revelation yet. Eric claimed that, before apps arrived, someone had tried to interfere, that certain individuals were actively discouraging the family from cooperating, alleged that misinformation was being spread deliberately to confuse and delay the process. There were people telling them I was the enemy, he said. People feeding them lies, saying I was trying to take their home. All I ever wanted was to keep them safe. He paused, eyes filling with tears. You have no idea how hard it is to fight for someone who doesn't even know you're on their side. In one of his final live streams before disappearing from social media, Eric made a promise to his viewers. I'm not quitting, he said firmly. Not until they're safe. Not until every lie is exposed. The chat filled with messages, hearts, prayers, encouragement, but also criticism and threats. He ignored them all. He had a mission now. He ended the stream the same way he'd started it. Everything that happens in the dark will come to the light. Days later, new reports surfaced online, unconfirmed, unverified, but powerful enough to reignite the fire. Claims that law enforcement had made welfare checks, whispers that certain individuals had been questioned, even rumors that someone close to the family had fled the area. Eric didn't confirm or deny any of it. Instead, he went silent. His last post read, "You'll understand soon. I did what I had to do." And just like that, he disappeared. No live streams, no updates, no new videos, but the story didn't disappear with him, if anything. It grew louder. While the online world speculated about his absence, something else was happening quietly behind the scenes. The investigation, real, documented, official, was expanding. Records began surfacing showing dates of visits, calls, and case reviews. And slowly, piece by piece, Eric's story began aligning with reality. Yet even then, the public couldn't decide whether to see him as a hero or a villain. To some, he was the man who refused to stay silent, a voice for the voiceless. To others, he was a manipulator who used tragedy for attention. But to Eric, it didn't matter anymore. I know what I did, he said, and I can live with it. As the dust settled and the internet turned its attention elsewhere, one truth remained. Eric had forced a conversation that no one else wanted to have, a conversation about accountability. About the system that fails the vulnerable. And about the price people pay for telling the truth. They'll say I overstepped, Eric said in his final video before disappearing. Maybe I did, but I'd rather be hated for doing something than loved for staying quiet. The screen faded to black. The comments kept coming, but for the first time in weeks, Eric didn't respond. Silence. That's what followed Eric's disappearance. No live streams. No updates. No late-night posts. Just quiet. For a story that had burned across social media for weeks, dominating comment sections, dividing communities, and sparking countless debates, the sudden silence felt eerie, but it didn't mean the story was over. In fact, it was only now that the truth, the real truth, began to surface. Behind the scenes, investigators were still working. Adult Protective Services, once overwhelmed by online noise, had quietly continued their review, and according to multiple reports, they had indeed conducted welfare checks on the family. Neighbors recalled unmarked cars parked outside the property, officers coming and going. Questions being asked. It wasn't drama anymore. It was real. And for the first time since Eric's confession, people started asking new questions, not about who said what online, but about what had really been happening inside that home. The details that emerged were grim. Authorities confirmed the living conditions were worse than anyone online had imagined. Health and safety violations, signs of neglect, and evidence that at least some of the abuse allegations had merit. The revelation hit the community hard. Those who had mocked Eric were now forced to reconsider their stance. Those who had supported him felt vindicated, but hollow. Because the truth, while validating, was heartbreaking. He wasn't lying, one supporter wrote in a post that went viral. He tried to stop it before it was too late. Nobody listened. But Eric wasn't there to celebrate being right. He wasn't online to accept apologies or say, "I told you so." He had vanished, and no one knew where he went. Some said he returned to Georgia. Others believed he stayed nearby, watching the situation from a distance. Refusing to interfere any further, his closest friends said he needed to heal, not physically, but mentally. He gave everything he had to that family, one friend said. It broke him. As the dust settled, the story of Eric's call to Adult Protective Services became more than just a viral drama. It became a lesson, one about truth, accountability, and the consequences of caring too much. Eric's decision had saved lives, but it had also cost him his peace. He'd been ridiculed, slandered, and betrayed. Yet, in the end, his actions forced the system to act, and that's what mattered most to him. I don't care what they say about me, Eric had said in one of his final live streams. If I die tomorrow, I'll die knowing I did the right thing. Those words, once dismissed as dramatic, now felt prophetic. The internet eventually moved on. The hashtags faded. The videos slowed down. But for those who followed the story closely, something lingered, an unease, a reflection of how quickly people judge what they don't understand, because for all the chaos, one truth remained undeniable. Eric's voice had changed everything. He was the one who forced people to look deeper, the one who wouldn't stay silent when silence was convenient, and whether you saw him as a hero or a villain, you couldn't deny his courage. Months later, a post appeared on one of Eric's old accounts. No caption, no video, just a photo. It showed a simple wooden sign, handmade, roughly painted, standing on a patch of grass. It read, "Do the right thing, even when they hate you for it." The comments poured in once again. Old supporters returned. Skeptics apologized. New followers discovered the story for the first time. And just like that, Eric's message, buried under months of noise and scandal, came full circle. He hadn't vanished out of guilt. He'd stepped away because he'd done his part. Today, the property where it all began sits quiet. The chaos, the shouting, the live streams, gone. In their place, stillness. Neighbors say the family is safe now that Adult Protective Services continued monitoring the situation long after the public stopped paying attention. No one knows exactly where Eric is, but his presence is still felt in every comment thread that says he was right, and every quiet moment where people realize what it means to act when no one else will. Eric's story is more than one man's confession. It's a mirror. A reflection of how we treat truth tellers, how quickly we crucify the ones who refuse to look away. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He lost his temper. He said things he probably regrets. But he also did something very few people have the courage to do. He acted. He saw abuse. He saw neglect. And instead of pretending it wasn't happening, instead of staying silent like so many before him, he made the call. In the end, that one phone call changed everything. It forced a system to look where it didn't want to. It protected people who couldn't protect themselves, and it revealed how dangerous the truth can be, not just for those who hide it, but for those brave enough to speak it. Eric's story isn't about drama. It's about accountability. It's about the power of one voice refusing to stay silent, even when that silence would have been easier. They'll forget my name, Eric once said, but they'll remember what I did. And he was right. Because long after the last comment fades and the final video disappears from the algorithm, the echo of that truth remains. The echo of one man's courage to pick up the phone and call for help when no one else would. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.